Okay, campers, rise and shine, and don't forget your booties 'cause it's cold out there today. That's right, it's Groundhog Day. That's right, Groundhog Day the game. We're going to take a look at it today. It's a 2 to 4 player game from 2 to 6 player game from Funko Prospero Hall, the makers of many fine products of licensed properties. In Groundhog Day, you are trying to create the perfect day. You do this over a course of rounds by which you're trying to weed out bad days until you can finally take a shot at putting together a perfect day. Let's take a look. So let's take a look at what comes in a box of Groundhog Day the game. First off, you have this handy dandy placard. This gives you sort of the timeline where Puxatawny Phil will make his way down this board. Once he gets here, you're going to have 8 chances to bake the perfect day. The numbers we'll explain later. Nice board. You also have 7 perfect day cards. The idea is to build the perfect day. The perfect day is 7 straight cards that are perfect cards. Those are cards with red border, lots of hearts, love is good, everything worked well, Phil learned his lesson, he's a better man, etc. You also have this clock, very reminiscent of that in the game. This one isn't smashed the way the one in the game, in the movie eventually was. And you have a timer, which you will use to speed things up and make people stress out. And then you have these score tokens. They're used each round to decide the score of that round. You always have to get a better score every round or else you lose the game. And finally, you have cards. All of these cards are different numbers with different rankings. Some of them are pretty worthless. They don't add anything as far as score. You want to play those early, and then you have other cards with more score. You have certain cards that at the end of the round will actually unlock these cards up here. So beginning with, you have, I think, 6 perfect cards in the deck, but you're going to need to play these cards in the right spot as best as you can in order to be able to get these extra perfect cards. The more perfect cards you have in the deck, the better you are. And yeah, that's it. You just go through and you notice the very memorable quotes being, and don't forget your boots, 'cause it's cold out there today. Booties. All right, staying up playing cards. I mean, anybody who's ever watched this game, particularly anyone who's watched it like hundreds of times, like me, will enjoy the reminiscent scenes and the artwork indicative of some of the famous quotes in the game. Going to the groundhog dinner? No, I had groundhog for lunch. Oh, gotta love it. Anyway, that's it for the components. Let's get into an example of play. Okay, so when you play the game, you're going to play 8 rounds. Each round, you're going to pass out cards from this deck to the number of players. You're going to spread it around as equally as possible. On the first day, you're going to spread 24 cards around. On the second turn, you're going to spread out 22, 20, 18, 16. For a 2-player game, it's pretty simple. 12 cards to each player, 11 cards to each player, 10 cards to each player. When you have higher player counts, though, some people may wind up with extra cards or not. Now, nobody knows, including yourself, what the cards are once they're dealt with you. They're dealt face down. I'm leaving them face up because otherwise, how am I going to explain the game? By no super secret sleuthing necessary. Then, what's going to happen is everyone's going to strategize and think, oh, what cards should we play? Okay, if you guys have low cards, I suppose. If we end up with low cards, they're going to talk it over, whatever. Nobody can see their cards when they're strategizing. When the strategizing part is done, everybody has to be silent. And then they can look at their cards, and when everyone's ready, they place their hand on the clock, and at that point, we flip the timer. Now, what begins is, you need to play cards. You have to play at least 7 cards, 1 through 7. You need to play them sequentially, not sequentially, but you need to play them in ascending order. Now, nobody knows what the other cards are, so this is really the element, the essence of the core gameplay, is trying to figure out whether your card is probably the best one to play, whether someone might think their card is the best one to play, and winding up being a problem. For example, the most obvious one is this. I got you, babe. So, okay, campers, rise and shine. So, playing this song, obviously this is not shared information, or is it? And then You place that here. Well, you know that's probably the best card you could play, and so the next person, even yourself, because there's no turns, people just play the cards as they feel compelled and led. It would be you have to be at least a 2 of some kind or more. Now here's the problem. What if this player thought, hey, you know what? This is probably the best we're going to get, and so they play 2. Well, doggone it, now this card isn't usable anymore. So the player just plays it out in front of them and says, quiet, and they can't talk, but they can glare, and they can say, well, I wish I could have used that one. And then everyone has to decide what to play next. Now, here's the interesting thing. You have cards with 3, but they don't have these hearts. You have to be careful. In the early stages of the game, you want not as many hearts as possible. Hearts are scores, and every round you have to do at least one better than the score that came before you. So it's a little bit of a balancing act here. So already we have a score of 3. So then we definitely don't want to play 4. That would be bad, because that would be a card that we wouldn't want to play. But darn, we wish we could have played this one, because that would have been only 1 score. So then we decide what to do here. This is really tricky. So we could do 7, 10, 11. This is tricky. So what if we did this? We're going to do 4. We're going to do, oh man, 5. We're putting ourselves in a bind here. 7, 9, and 10. Say that we all just worked that out. So yay, okay, we've done our 7 before the timer ran out. We lie, it ran out, but I'm explaining things, so the timer's just going to have to deal with it. But now we're at a situation that's not exactly optimal. What's going on here? All of the cards that we've used are now out of the game. That can be a good thing, because these cards are not going to be in your mind again. We wish we could have gotten rid of this, but this might be valuable on another turn, so not all hope is lost. But we move all these cards in again. They all go back in the deck, because the next round they're going to be used again. I'll do that off camera, because no one really needs to see me shuffle like a moron. And we have this many. Now notice, 3, 6, 9, 10. This is horrible, absolutely horrible, because now we have to get at least 11 on the next round. And we're going to play 8 rounds of this. So we're going to go here, we're going to deal out 11 cards. And 11 cards. So let me do that now. Okay, now we're in the next round. Once again, people would not even be able to see their own cards. Then they talk and go, well, looks like we're going to have to get at least 11, so let's focus on maybe using yellow cards at the start, and then whatever, blah, blah, blah. Then everybody silently looks at their cards, hits the clock, and then we flip it over again. This time we have, oh, I'm not going to lose that, so 1 there. Now, we don't know, use the 3, she's hesitant to use anything, because that would be a lot of points there, unless kind and versatile was what you wanted. But you want to not use these if you can help it, because you need these perfect cards later on in the game. So let's go 3. We just have to skip 2. We think we're okay there. And then 5, and then 6, and then let's go ahead and do 7. All right, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we know we've got to get at least 5 more points, or else we're going to lose, because we have to do that. 7, and that's not great. 7, 8. So we need 4 more points, and we're not going to get it. So basically, we lose already. How's that? I didn't, and this is the tricky part, is that you don't want to use high score cards right away, because you're just setting the bar a little bit too high and stuff. In the end, what's going to happen is, if we had been able to get past that and do a better job, which I did not do in my explanation, but as you're going to do 8 rounds. You're going to see, as a matter of fact, you'll notice this is how it's going to look like when it's over. So give yourself a lot of room, because that is one heck of a lattice. When you do this, your goal is to play as many, like for example, 2, 3, 5. Everyone's trying to play all their perfect cards, which you need to pick up along the way. So say we ended up with 7, 8, 9, 10. 9. That is when you win. At some point before round 8, usually towards the end, you want to be able to go, okay guys, and this is where the pre-strategy can come in, like, we're on round 7, so if everyone can play, should we do this? Should we all take a risk? But by the turn 8, you have no choice but to go. If we don't get perfect cards, we're not going to win. So there's a lot going on in this game despite the utter incomplete simplicity of it. So anyway, that's kind of a basic idea of how you play Groundhog Day. Let's get into my final thoughts on, get into my final thoughts on, get into my final thoughts on, get into my final thoughts on Groundhog Day. Okay, final thoughts on Groundhog Day, the game. Let's go over the cons first. I'm going to say that the silent treatment aspect is pretty out of place. I don't think I can map to Groundhog Day in any fashion where it fits. And so it's more for the game style. The movie is a dark romantic comedy. It's not a silent movie. Its addition of the sort of the silent thing for gameplay purposes only is it sticks out a little bit, but I get it. They're trying to be the mind with Groundhog Day and plastered on there. It's essential because that's kind of, without it, you really don't have gameplay at all. The nature of the game and its similarities to the mind require that you have it, but it's still a bit of a stretch. But that's really the con I have. Let's go over the pros. This game is bathed in Groundhog Day isms. The cartoon art is very, very true to the iconic scenes that you could quote in your mind as memorializing as they were decades ago. You could spew them off today. The timer is nice. In the game, it's just your standard timer, but the timer app is much more apropos because of its polka. It just adds to the vibe. It would be. It's odd to go from a silent timer to raucous polka-vising, and it's probably not for everyone. But for us, it's absolutely essential because that's just part of the storyline that you're trying to recreate. The goal of the game, at its most stripped down essence, is that you are basically filtering and deck trimming. It's all about filtering and deck trimming. It's just getting rid of the old and getting into the new and giving yourself the best shot. And I like that. The gameplay has a simplicity as to the end goal, but the sort of faith walk that players take in trying to interpolate their idea of what card is the next best one is where the tension and the turmoil and the sighs of relief or the agonizing moans are at their best. It's not so simple that there isn't a bit of timing and tension to go with it too. The low cards are possible to start, but not always an option, so you have to kind of improvise. And still, you want to be able to get those high point cards out so that you could get the perfect cards at some point in the eighth round or get close to the end. I mean, this is beautiful because you're basically setting this. Each round, if you can survive it, then you're setting this sort of culmination to this final stages where you're like, okay, do we have it? Do we have what we need for liftoff? Are we ready to just put down the 7 cards of the perfect day? Can we do this? There's a surprising amount of suspense for what is a bone simple game. So, in summary, Prospero Hall rarely disappoints me in its games based on brands. I mean, when it disappoints, it really disappoints, but it rarely does. And a caveat is that a lot of their games need to be played with the spirit of their intent. I mean, many of these games are fun and entertaining, but they're not going to rock your world. A couple do. A couple just are shining, sterling board gamers, regular gamers, casual gamers, whatever. But you play them in the spirit of the intent. This is meant to be a lighthearted, fun recreation of Groundhog Day that you could teach to people who otherwise are not going to be deeply ensconced in the board gaming fare. Groundhog Day, despite the quirky Vow of Silence aspect, is a remarkably clever retelling of the story. It's using some basic principles of other simple games to mimic the circuitous movie script in a way that keeps everyone involved, and the play sessions are suspenseful and edgy. I don't know, at its price point of $17, it is a game I will play often. Like the movie, it's worth a repeat performance. So thanks, take care, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.